Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the YXE Sports Podcast for the week of December the 14th. We are so close to Christmas, and I couldn't be any more unprepared. Thanks for tuning in, everybody that's watching on Facebook, on Widow Clark's Classic Grill and Bars Facebook page, on the YXE Sports Podcast Facebook page, on No YXE as well. And a big thanks to everybody that is watching or listening, rather, to the audio version of this podcast. See, I take a week off and then I'm just all over the place. Big thanks to everybody who sent out their well wishes and that sort of thing. Of course, I did have surgery a few weeks ago, but I'm back. I'm ready. My arm is in a sling for 23 and a half hours a day. And I really couldn't be feeling any better. I'm also grossly unprepared for this podcast as well. So this is going to be very exciting. Although I did decide to give producer Ian an early Christmas present because a little later on in the show, he's going to end up talking about F1 with David Fisher as well. So look forward to that on the back half of this week's episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. Joe says, get well. Thanks so much, Joe. I'm doing well. Lots of ice. Lots of rest, lots of people caring for me. So it's been awesome. This is like a couch potato's dream. Can't wait to settle in and watch the Toronto Maple Leafs crush the Edmonton Oilers after this as well. But of course, this past Sunday was the 108th Grey Cup. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, the city of Hamilton was hosting the Grey Cup. They got to play at home in the Grey Cup and lost an absolute heartbreaker in overtime to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers by a score of 33-25. The Blue Bombers, of course, winning in overtime. They were able to battle back, force overtime. They scored on their first possession with a successful 2-point convert as well. And then they forced an interception when it was Hamilton's turn to go on offense. Forced that interception. That's how the game ended. So the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, technically back-to-back Grey Cup champions. There wasn't a season in 2020, so they won in 2019. And of course, they won again in 2021, and just such a heartbreaker for Hamilton. If you watched the game, you saw the crowd. A lot of the crowd, the Winnipeg fans traveled well, but a lot of the crowd was decked out in the black and gold, and I couldn't imagine the heartbreak that they have going through. What is that? I think it's 4 Grey Cups since 1999 now that they've lost. Of course, they lost in 2013 to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Of course, when Saskatchewan was hosting the Grey Cup, that was kind of I know that new Mosaic Stadium didn't open until 2017, but that was like one of the final send-offs of old Mosaic Stadium was the Roughriders hosting that Grey Cup. And I mean, Hamilton kind of has nobody to blame but themselves. They did kind of let that one slip away. Some questionable coaching, especially in that second half, especially in the fourth quarter. Now, admittedly, I didn't see the entirety of the game. I missed, pretty much all of the first quarter. Or the first half, rather. But it sounds like I didn't really miss much. Hamilton was up 10-7. They had a couple of turnovers in the second half and just for whatever reason couldn't put it together. I'm not sure if everybody that's watching feels the same way, but please leave your comments, questions, concerns, thoughts in the comment section, and I will get to them. And of course, it was that late field goal by Winnipeg. They were down by 1. They were down 22-21, I think it was, or 23-22. They kicked the field goal to go up by 3 and then kick off. And what does Tim White, the return man for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, do? Takes a knee in the end zone, which in the CFL is technically a point. So all of a sudden, a 2-point game turns into a 3-point game. Hamilton does do a great job of driving the field. The drive stalls out at the Winnipeg 5-yard line, I believe it was. And they ended up having to kick a field goal, which if that rouge didn't happen, that would have been a game-winning field goal. That was a game-tying field goal. And then all of a sudden, now it's a tie game. You're going into overtime. And then Winnipeg is able to win, and they're able to go back-to-back. A lot of people are thinking, and this pains me to say as a Rider fan, but a lot of people are thinking this might be the start of a Winnipeg Blue Bomber dynasty. They have won back-to-back Grey Cups. Tough to say. I'm not sure if that's something that can happen or not, but you look at Winnipeg's road to get there. They kind of breezed through the regular season. They had a little bit of a tough time in the playoffs. Obviously, they still won, but they faced a little more adversity. But that's the sign of a good team, is how they battle through adversity. Of course, they beat the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Western Final to get to the Grey Cup. against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That's a game that we haven't really been able to dissect either. Boo Bombers, but congrats, Doyle. I totally agree. But that West Final was a game that we haven't really been able to dissect either. But the Saskatchewan Roughriders, much like Hamilton in the Grey Cup, the Saskatchewan Roughriders kind of, that one away because they forced 6 turnovers. Great job by their defense. The Saskatchewan Roughrider defense in that West Final forced 5 or 6 turnovers and had 17 points to show for it. That's just not good enough. To make matters worse, basically everybody except Cody Fajardo is a free agent for the Saskatchewan Roughriders this offseason. Big names, Duke Williams, Ed Gainey, they're hitting free agency. So general manager of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Jeremy O'Day, has his work cut out for him here in the offseason, which is going to be, by all accounts, hectic. There's a lot of big name free agents, and I can't wait to see the chaos unfold. Both of Hamilton's Tiger Cats, Jeremiah Mazzoli and Dane Evans, are free agents as well. You got to think that they're probably, if I was Hamilton, I'd probably be leaning towards keeping Dane Evans over Jeremiah Mazzoli, but that's why I'm here in my bunker in Saskatoon and not in the front office in Hamilton of wherever the Tiger Cats headquarters are. I don't know if they're at the stadium or somewhere else, but I would probably rather be keeping Dane Evans as opposed to Jeremiah Mazzoli. So the CFL was able to complete the season. A lot of people didn't think they would be able to with COVID and stuff like that, but there was also a lot of people that said because they didn't play in 2020, it was an absolute necessity that they had to get this season. It had to be a success, and I think it was. You look at COVID situations, they had to kind of rework some Edmonton Elk games, but they got all games in. Some games, yes, were postponed, but they were able to get all games in with the exception of the Elks. No real COVID outbreaks, and the whole reason that outbreak even happened was because a player lied about his vaccine status, but that's a whole other story for a whole other day. So I've been critical of Randy Ambrosie, but credit to him. He was able to get the CFL season off, and there's a little hiccup here and there, but not too much. So just as I'm about to give Randy Ambrosie that credit, he gave the State of the League address at Grey Cup week, something that he does every year in the week leading up to Grey Cup. And one of the things that they're going to look at in the offseason is turning the Canadian Football League into 4 downs. Of course, it's the 3-down game. It's what makes the Canadian Football League at all levels. I can't put into words what that would do to the CFL. The CFL says they have a problem, with fans and stuff like that, especially younger fans. Okay, yeah, maybe I do agree with that, but changing the game from 3 downs to the conventional 4-down game that's seen south of the States isn't the way to do it. Nobody watches college football, the NFL, any football in the States. Nobody watches it because there's 4 downs. They watch it for other reasons. They watch it, obviously, because of the talent. The Canadian Football League has a lot of that as well. And if people would tune in to watch a Canadian Football League game, they would understand that. But they tune in because it's marketed well. It's on TV all the time. It's, all the NFL teams, or a lot of the NFL teams, you can get their stuff online. You can get their stuff in local sporting goods stores. I used to work at a local sporting goods store. I know exactly how it is. You have your Saskatchewan Roughrider merchandise, and then you have about 10 to 12 NFL team merchandise in the store, in hats, jerseys, hoodies, whatever the case may be. So I don't think the 3-down versus 4-down thing is a reason why the CFL maybe is, I don't want to say losing interest, but didn't have that much interest or as much interest this season. It's all about how you market. So Randy Ambrosie, the team at the CFL, it sounds like you're going to be looking at everything this offseason. The one thing that you can probably leave alone is the actual on-field rules, the actual way that the game is played. Of course, the CFL, XFL talks have ramped up. I don't think that that's a good idea either. The XFL obviously has been around twice. They folded both times. Now in 2020, it was due to COVID, so I give them a little bit of a break there. But it's just an interesting conversation to have. Of course, this all goes back to the way that people are watching games as well. Doyle says, because it's $1 billion league. I'm assuming he's referring to the NFL, because there's no way he's referring to the XFL or the CFL. But Doyle, I would agree in that sense. But this all goes back to kind of what we were talking about, or what I wanted to talk about earlier. Bunny hugs, yes, Saskatchewan. Doyle, I look at the analytics of this show, and we have a lot of people that watch or listen in the States and all across the country. So I'm just trying to be as inclusive as I can with the whole bunny hug hoodie thing. TV ratings, before Doyle got me off track, this is where I was going with this. TV ratings for the 108th Grey Cup were down 22% from 2019. So traditional TV, that's what they're talking about. That number was down 22% in from 2019's Grey Cup game. Now, streaming was up 75%. TSN came out with those numbers. Of course, they're the broadcast carrier of the Canadian Football League. So they came out with the numbers of traditional media. They came out with the numbers of streaming. So everybody was kind of quick to put up the red flags. And yes, I understand why when you see that it's down 22% on traditional media. However, streaming, it was up 75%. That's just the way that young kids and people my age are watching sports, watching TV now. Me personally, I have a cable box at home. So, I totally understand why some people do just do the streaming thing and stuff like that. I have the traditional cable box because I still like watching a variety of sports, and Melissa likes to watch The Bachelorette and stuff like that. And that's when I go downstairs and watch my sports. But that's a topic for another day as well. So it is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. I don't know if that's necessarily cause for concern either. The fact that streaming numbers were up, traditional cable was down. Bottom line is they still got a ton of viewers to watch the 108th Grey Cup. And somebody on social media brought up a good point and said this could be due to parity as well. Hamilton and Winnipeg were in the 2019 Grey Cup. Winnipeg rather was the favor for the 2021 Grey Cup by a long shot. So kudos to Hamilton for almost being able to pull it off. But a lot of people might have thought that as soon as Winnipeg got to that Grey Cup, that Grey Cup was in the bag. But that's my little rant for this week's episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. I guess what I'm trying to get to is support the CFL. You say you love the CFL and all this and all that. Well, why don't you support it? Buy your favorite team's merchandise. Buy a ticket to a game. I know they're expensive, but you got how many months to save up until 2022 rolls around? So that's my rant for the YXE Sports Podcast for this week. I hope Ian lets me do rants more often than not, because these are really fun. Of course, we are live. Well, I am at home, but we are live on the Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar Facebook page. And Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar, they had an awesome turnout at Grey Cup, the 108th Grey Cup on Sunday. Just because the Grey Cup's over, no reason to stop going to Wendell Clark's, by the way, because it's NFL Thursday, Monday, and Sunday. How about that Monday night or last night between Arizona and the LA Rams as well? But yeah, come on down to Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar. Sunday, kids eat free. Sunday wing deals on the corner of Circle and Idlewild. So it is Christmas. I'm in the giving spirit, and I absolutely love the work that producer Ian and his team does. So I thought, hey, I'll give him a Christmas present. And this is better than any actual item. This is better than a gift card or a gift basket or something he could use at home. This is Ian's dream coming true. So Ian Roach, I'm going to bring you in because after about 2 years, give or take, you finally get your wish. I'm talking about Formula One. You have a guest that you're going to bring in as well. So I'll kind of mediate. I'll kind of jump in here and there whenever I have a question or something,
This is really exciting.
Why don't you introduce?
I've been beaming all day. We should, of course, bring in our other guest, David Fisher.
Yes.
We're both super Formula One fans, but as you can see, if I try and point right there, I'm a Formula One pundit.
We got to stop. David? We got to stop letting Ian do this. Like, we got to stop.
I wanted to have pundit on my name too.
Somebody else can change it. We can charge of who makes the graphics. That might have to get reworked into my contract in the new year.
You have complete control over your graphics. You go edit name on your little person there. That's fine. David, thank you so much for joining us. Matt, thank you for the opportunity. This is amazing, and because it's a Christmas present, we have the beautiful Christmas background that's going right now. Isn't that amazing?
I love it.
Indeed.
We're here, David. We'll just put Matt aside. He can interrupt us when we get too nerdy, but
good point.
Let's talk Formula One.
Well,
maybe the place to start.
What Matt was saying about how unusual it is to have that, featured in a sports cast is true because
it's very true.
When 85% of it is happening at 5 a.m., it's hard to develop the following. But
on a Sunday, no less.
That's changing now, though, Matt. Thanks to Netflix of all people. They have a series
Drive to
called Drive to
Survive.
Survive that has had phenomenal viewership and uptake by a very young audience. And that showed this year when they raced in Texas. They had one of the largest attendances ever for Formula One in the
If I
U.S.
recall,
So
David, I think it was the largest attended sporting event since the pandemic started. It was 140,000. Is that right? Is that the number?
it was
Somewhere
a
around there.
massive
It
uptake,
was
and
huge.
they had to attribute it, a lot of it to Netflix serving them. So hey, maybe this will happen again next year. Maybe it won't have to be a few more years.
It will. Maybe we could have a regular feature. We could have our regular spot on the show. Hint, hint. But you're right, David. It is a lonely sport to be a fan of on the prairies, and I'm glad that I found you because we're few and far between. So maybe I'll kind of set kind of the stage to where we got to Sunday morning, and then you can take it from there, Dave, and explain kind of what happened in the race. So basically, one of the things, the criticisms that I've heard in the sport is that the dominance of Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. Often when I tell friends I watched the race and it was really exciting, and they'd say, "Who won? Lewis?" Yeah, he won. But still, the race was exciting. But that's been the case for the last 7 years that Mercedes has won the last 7 championships. 6 of those Lewis has won. 1 year, I think it was 2016, Nico Rosberg won. So that brings us to this season. 23 races in this season. Red Bull, who had won the previous 4 races with Sebastian Vettel, previous 4 world championships, prior to the streak, is showing some promise. Max Verstappen is a good racer in terms of being fast. And that kind of sets that we have this 23 race season. It's been tit for tat all year. I think I saw a stat somewhere that the lead of the world championship changed hands, if not a record, almost a record amount of times over the course of the season. And then we get to the final race in Abu Dhabi, the 23rd race, and both drivers are tied in points at 369.5. So it couldn't be any closer. They
Which had only
qualified.
happened one other year in all of Formula One, correct?
I think so. And that was probably
I
back
believe
in
so.
the Senna days or something, wasn't it? Was it a while
Yeah,
back?
74, I think. Either way,
So it's
an
been a while.
incredibly rare occurrence.
And it has been. I think, what was the race that Felipe Massa and that was the last lap. I guess what I'm getting at is it's rare for it to come down to the last race for the championship.
It is uncommon, absolutely.
Rare. It's uncommon, but this year it did. I think it was 2012, maybe it did in Brazil with Felipe Massa losing. I think probably that year. I can't quite remember the year. Don't get me. Maybe it's 2016. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, which one is it?
I'm going to say 2016 because I think Lewis Hamilton actually won, didn't he? Or was it 2012?
He did.
McLaren?
He did.
What was he with McLaren at the time?
See, this
That's
is the
correct.
best part about this because I can just jump in and say silly stuff like this all
That wasn't silly. It's a valid point. You're keeping us on point. So we get to it. Max Verstappen wins qualifying Saturday, puts him on pole. Lewis Hamilton second. David, how'd the race go?
I loved this race. This was all over the place. Again, the underdog had pole position, but that changed on lap number 1. Lewis Hamilton pulled ahead. Most people like me, he's such a legendary driver. I kind of thought that was pretty much the end of the race. He would just drive away with it. But no, as you say, the lead changed throughout the races. And then ultimately to make an amazing 90 minutes, to sum it up quickly, in literally the last lap, because of safety car, which they have to invoke when there's a problem on the track, a crashed car, they have to put a safety car in to lead them. The call by the officials, ultimately relating to the safety car and how that was handled, effectively handed the win to Verstappen. I don't want to suggest he didn't deserve it. He absolutely did, but it made for a lot of controversy. That's a pretty blunt summation, isn't it, Ian?
Yeah. I mean, we can unpack that in a bit and kind of some of the controversy in the sense that I think it was with 5 laps left, Nicholas Latifi crashed.
Canadian driver.
And they had to get his car off the circuit. And the cars are just so fast now that often to clear a circuit, especially these high-speed circuits, they deploy the safety car, bunches up the pack. So the pack will go by under the safety car at a much slower speed, and the workers have 75, 90 seconds before they come around to do their work with the fear of being hit. But there's also this pressure to finish races under racing conditions. Don't finish them under the safety flag or under a safety car. So that was kind of the situation. There was pressure to get the race finished under green racing conditions. But to do that, the race director has an option as well to deal with cars that have been lapped, that before they return to racing conditions, he can allow lapped cars at the race director's discretion to pass the safety car and come back around, catch up the pack. So it unlaps them, gives them a bit more chance to get in the fight of the race or whatever. Early on, the race director said there will be no chance for the lapped cars to overtake. And part of that was he wanted to get the race going. And if they had allowed all the lapped cars to go by, that they would have finished under the safety car. There just wasn't time to do it. So they clear it. And then he made the decision to allow only the lapped cars between Lewis Hamilton and first. Max Verstappen, I think there's 4 cars. So probably in
There were
fifth
4
place.
cars between them.
Well, he's in second, but there's 4 cars
way.
between them. He let them get out of the way and said, cars go away. So now instead of Max having to pass lapped cars before he gets to attack Lewis, there's no cars. He let those cars go by. Safety cars allowed to go in that lap. A bit more controversy there because if you look at the rules, it can be interpreted that you have to let the safety cars go by and then wait a lap for the safety car to go in. That's kind of the scenario. I guess the other part of it is that Max pitted under the safety car for fresh tires, and Lewis chose to stay out on much older tires.
The thing that's problematic with that decision at the end was that, the race steward, and it's, imagine the same ref for every game. It's the same racing director for every race. He travels with,
that would be terrible. Like imagine if you didn't like one of them, or you didn't like that one, or, that one has a personal vendetta against you for whatever reason. That would, sorry to jump in, but yeah, that would be terrible.
But no, and this fellow is new. This is his first year in this role. And I think it really showed, because making that decision, he knew there's no way he could not know he was handing a massive advantage to Verstappen. A big factor in that type of racing, of course, is the age of your tires, how many laps your tires have served. Often after 20 laps, they're almost useless. They're barely drivable. In F1, it's like that. And the racing director knew that Lewis Hamilton's tires were 20 years old, or 20 laps old, and Verstappen's were fresh. So I think he knew exactly the advantage he was handing, and that's questionable.
I am going to jump in here for 2 seconds because Dennis has a real barn burner of a question on Facebook. Formula One is the cars, correct? Formula One is
the
cars,
4 wheels.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, there's 4 wheels.
But also,
there's a couple seasons they had 6 wheels.
On a more serious note, and both of you can jump in, or David can jump in here, or Ian, doesn't matter. But we talked when I first brought you two in. We kind of talked about the success that Drive to Survive has had on Netflix, and how there's maybe a little bit of a correlation between that and the attendance that has been at some of the events this year. Where do you see, kind of long term or shorter term, even within the next few seasons, where do you kind of see that level of interest in F1? Do you kind of see that staying at the top, or do you see that increasing? What do you guys think?
I would definitely see it increasing, because this Drive to Survive show, they take the previous season and they repackage it into 9 episodes. And so this season being what it was, with all the built-in and the controversy, will make for a very engaging next season. And I already know there's a second American Grand Prix being scheduled in Miami.
Yeah. There's huge pressure to expand into North America. It's a huge market. We have the one Canadian race. I don't think we had it this year. Austin, Texas, where the American race is. There's one in Mexico City. But you're right, Dave. They are going to, I think, is it on the calendar for next year? Miami?
It is.
Or is it 2 years from now? It is.
Yeah.
So there is pressure to get in this market. Not only, I think, is attendance at events increased, but there's also been, I think, viewership is up across all the broadcasters. In fact, there's some stats that will show that Formula One is the most watched sporting event on the dial, maybe save a World Cup. But it is
globally,
worldwide.
It's not unlike soccer that way, in that most people kind of aren't as aware of it.
Exactly.
In North America.
I want to go back to the Felipe Massa, the new race director, and it was a tragic. I think it was not this season before in Australia. Charlie Whiting, right? Yeah,
that's right.
At Australia, he actually suddenly died unexpectedly at the first race of the season, and it's been a big vacuum to fill. But I also, there's been calls for him to be sacked because of this decision. I might be a little gentler than Dave was. I think probably the motivation was to get the race going. Don't finish a world championship race under.
It was amateur. It was. I like the empathy you're showing, and yeah, I think perhaps what was ultimately motivating him was true, but those were such rank amateur decisions. Yeah, I would sack him.
Well,
Harsh.
there's those calls, but the question is, who do you get? And can Michael Massey grow into the role? I mean, has he learned from this and those decisions aren't going to be made? Then the other question that people are saying is, should teams actually have that much radio communication with the race director? I'd argue they probably do, given the nature of the sport and the safety concerns.
This is one of the interesting things that as F1 develops as a televised sport, better access to things like the teams communicating somewhat in real time, a slightly delayed, with the race director, with the referees, essentially. So, imagine in hockey if you could hear every conversation the refs were having. Yeah, mind you, as I understand it, that's been in place for a long time. It's only recently that viewers have been privy to it, courtesy of the
Nothing before that is by email, because you'd be watching races. They say we've sent an email to protest that, or ask Charlie if we should give the space back. So it's certainly by doing voice communication, it's probably quicker. But really, you have 10 teams trying to. Michael's kind of the control. This way I understand it, David, is Michael Massey is the race director, and there's a separate room for stewards. The teams do not have contact to them, and Michael can refer something to stewards for a decision, or he can make real-time decisions himself about the safety.
This is the heart of the controversy is historically, and at F1 is always black and white with its rules. There's absolute clarity. You're either within the formula or you're outside it. If you're out, the penalties are specific. So it's not often involving judgment calls. But this new race director and this race that determined the championship, I thought was laden with poor judgment calls.
We could even argue earlier in the season, there's a lot of people are saying that the race director was making decisions, and that felt at times inconsistent in terms of some overtaking on the track where there was contact and or pushing somebody wide. It's not the first race that's had these controversial decisions of this season, I guess.
I ultimately think it's great for the sport, even though it's because controversy is good. And I believe me, Lewis Hamilton will be back and fighting for he'll be a contender for his 8th championship. So I'm looking forward to this legendary rivalry continuing.
I like what David said about controversy. Controversy brings people together, in my opinion. Well, maybe not together. It separates people more than anything, but it gets the people talking, and then that garners interest, right? So
absolutely brings more viewers, unlike running a podcast in Saskatoon talking about F1 and watching the viewership go down.
Well, you watch our numbers explode now that I had you two on. Numbers are just going to go through the roof. So, David, thanks so much for tagging along.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
It was more so Ian that got a hold of you, but thanks for making yourself available to chat about this. And
before we go,
Ian, thanks so much.
Before we go, 4 downs in CFL.
Yeah, what is that?
I couldn't believe it when I heard you say that. Yeah.
Doyle's still here, if anybody's wondering too. So that's good.
Thanks, Doyle.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for letting us geek out.
Big thanks to everybody. Big thanks to Ian and David for joining me on the YXE Sports Podcast for the week of December the 14th. Ian's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's it for 2021.
That's it. Merry Christmas. That's it for
2021.
Everybody.
So,
hey, I got some lights. I can bring in Christmas lights.
Oh, there you go.
How about a bit of snow?
Yeah. It's supposed to get really cold tonight or tomorrow night. Do you have one for that?
No.
Do you have like an icicle or something that can just go across the screen?
Not loaded. Cool. I'm sorry. No.
But big thanks to everybody for watching and listening throughout the year 2021. We're still planning on doing this, I hope, in 2022. Anyways, if Ian doesn't want to do this anymore, then I guess I'll have to find somebody else, because I really love this. I love all of you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will chat in January.
See you in 2022. Thanks, David.
Cheers all.